Hello everyone, welcome back. This is going to be the session 2 of our SQL Essential tutorial series. In this video, we will see what are the important components or the object which we can create and store inside a RDBMS. But before jumping into the session, let's have a quick recap of what we have learned in session 1. If you have not watched the session 1, I would recommend to go and watch the session 1 so that you will not miss any important concept of SQL. Okay, so in the previous video in session 1, we have learned a brief history of SQL. Then we have seen why SQL is so important in today's world as well. Then we have also seen what is a database. We have seen what is a SQL. We have seen what is a database management system, what is a relational database management system, and then we have seen what are the parts of a relational database management system. We have seen like basically there are two major part of a RDBMS. One is the database server or the backend, and one is the front end or the client interface. So as we know, in the backend database server, we can store the data, okay, and the client interface or the front end tool is used to manipulate the data which we have stored in the backend server. So the client tool is used for creating the data, storing the data, manipulating the data. Everything is done using the client interface, but the actual data is stored in the database server, which is a backend of RDBMS. Okay. Now we know this. So now the question comes, what are the object which we can create inside a database server? Okay, we store a lot of data in a database server, right? So in what format we can store the data? We need to create multiple object which will be used to store and do any operation on the data which we have stored, right? So what are those objects that we are going to see in this second session? So when we say a database server and when we say a database, okay, so there are two things. One is a database server and one is a database. So people often use these two terms interchangeably, but there is a slight difference in both the term. Database server is actually a physical machine which can be used to install the RDBMS software, and also the hard disk of that database server is used to store the data. Okay. But when we say database, it is an object which we create inside a database server. We can create either one database or more than one database inside a database server. Okay, so don't get confused with the term database server and database. Both are have a slightly different meaning. One is a physical machine which we call it as database server. One is a and the database is the actual database which we create inside a server. Okay. Now let's jump into the today's session. The agenda of this session is to see the component or the object which we can create inside a RDBMS. First of all, we can create a database. Okay. Then once the database is created, we can create a schema inside a database. We can create tables inside a database. We can create views. We can create indexes. Then there is a catalog or system catalog, which is by default created along with the installation. And then we can create a store procedures and function inside a RDBMS. And there are many more component as well, but from the starting point of view, we should be good if we know the real meaning of all these components. You might be thinking like these are very simple, right? Database, tables, views, and I know that. But in real world, like a lot of people have still confusion between the terms like views, schema, okay, indexes. So my objective is to make everyone clear of all the terminologies which everyone should know before starting learning the SQL. So So the first and most important component of RDBMS, or the most important object of RDBMS, is a database. You can think of the database as a storage container or a storage unit which is present inside a DB server. And once that storage has been created, and if you further want to store any other object inside a DB server, or you want to create any other object inside a DB server like table, views, indexes, or any other object, then you will be creating that object inside a database. Okay, so this is the most top layer unit or the storage of our DB server, which is created inside a DB server, and then any other object will be created inside a database. Let's try to see the definition of database. So databases are named storage containers created inside a DBMS server to store and organize related data object. Okay, so any other object you want to store inside a DB server, you will be creating inside a database. So the first, after installing the server, after installing the DBMS software on a server, the first thing you create is a database. Okay, and one more definition is given here. Each database holds table, views, and other objects together for a specific application or a specific project. So, for example, if you have a huge DB server and multiple projects or multiple applications are using that database server, so all of them will not create their respective objects like respective tables or views inside a single database. What they can do, they can create their separate databases inside DB server, and they will use their individual databases. Okay. Now let's see what is the syntax to create a database. Simply you can use this create database, and database name you can give. It will be created a database with the name which you have given. Okay. And if you are using any client tool, for example, PG admin or SQL server or SQL developer, so it gives a UI option as well, which you can utilize to create a database. Okay. So I have got installed this Postgres server in my laptop, which we can see how to create a database. So it has by default a database created Postgres, and I have created one more database, HashDB. Okay, if I want to create more databases, we can simply right click on this Postgres DB and go to the query tool. Here you can type any query. If you want to create a database, you can simply type create database, and we can give some name, db underscore hd insights, for example, and you need to simply run it. It will create a database. Query returned successful. So it has created a database. If we refresh this UI page, open the list of databases, you can see this hash data inside database has been created. If you want to create any other object inside a database, you can simply go to this query tool, and here you can create any other object. Then that object will be created inside the database which we have created. Okay. So like this, you can create multiple databases inside a single server. You can see here is only one server, right? But we have multiple databases. So this is called as a DB server. Okay, this Postgres SQL 17. This is a DB server, and there are two databases we have created inside this DB server, and one is a default database which got created along with the installation. Okay, now if you want to drop this database, you cannot drop this database within from within this database itself. You need to connect to this uh, uh, some other database which have the higher privilege. Okay, admin privilege to drop the other databases. So you can go to the query tool of that admin database. Here you can write the command drop database db and db underscore hd. insights. Okay, let's try to drop the database which we have just now created. It is running currently. Let's see what it says. It is saying database is being accessed by other user. Okay, because we have also connected to this database, that's why it is not dropping out. So we can simply write a command here with force. When we write this with force, so even if that database is being used, that will get drop. Let's try to run this command. Drop database, query return successful. Now if you again reload this page, you will see that database will get removed from the list of databases. Now only two databases are there. This one was previously created, and this is a default database, and the database which we created, that has been dropped now. This is how you can create and remove databases. We will continue learning about the other objects in the subsequent videos.